Hello, everyone. My name is Meg Mulrooney. I'm a professor of history here, and I'm chair of the JMU Campus History Committee and want to welcome you to today's panel. Like many predominantly white universities, JMU has been involved in a critical examination of the way that its past as a segregated institution is still influencing policies and practices in the present. That examination includes consideration of what individuals are commemorated in named buildings and spaces, as well as how we can make our campus history more accurate and more inclusive. You probably know that JMU was established as the State Normal and Industrial School for Women in 1908. In 1917, the Board of Trustees and the administration at that time named multiple buildings for Confederate officers. Those buildings attracted heightened interest starting in the 70s with desegregation, and then again much more recently in the aftermath of violence in Charlottesville in 2017 and after the death of George Floyd in 2019. Last summer, our current Board of Visitors voted unanimously to remove the names of those three individuals, and the Campus History Committee decided that it needed to prioritize naming practices as we go forward. Before we dive into the work of the committee, however, I want you to hear a little bit from a colleague of mine about the way that the university is embracing a whole other series of activities. So I want to introduce Brent Lewis to you. He is Associate Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Brent?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Meg, for inviting me to this conversation. There's a couple of things that we're doing as a university. I'm serving as a member of the Racial Equity Task Force, co-chairing one of the working groups there. And we are really having some good conversation around what are things that are challenged for the university, but also what are students telling us about their experience. In addition, I'm also co-chairing the Tiger team, which is a group that's out of student affairs, but we do have individuals from other areas of the university serving in that group. And we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion challenges for the university and proactively talk about strategy for addressing those concerns. Lastly, I'll talk about the social justice group of students that I get to meet with on a biweekly. Norman, who's on this call, is one of those students that comes to my biweekly meetings. And we really talk about what do students see, what updates do they need from us, and how do we work with students to create a safe and affirming environment for all identities. Many of our Black students protested this summer as well as in August and gave us administrators a list of things that they wanted us to work on. So we partner with them on a biweekly basis to talk about those concerns. Where are we? Where do we need to go in terms of a timeline? And then also working with the SJI, Social Justice and Inclusion group in student affairs to address some of those student concerns. But I believe it takes a university approach and a university lens to address all of our students' challenges, because one unit can't do all things DEI.
Hello, I'm Diane Phoenix-Neal, member of the Campus History Committee, Sisters in Session, and an assistant professor of music. I'll introduce our panel today with a little background information. The people on our panel today a complete range of viewpoints. Among them are faculty members, professional staff, undergraduate students, alumni, and community members. Today's discussion presents a necessary and relevant dialogue on how diverse community members experience and envision the JMU commemorative landscape. Our conversations can set a reflective tone going forward for commemorative recognition, for diversity, equity, and inclusion on our campus, and for the development of researched recommendations. After talking with the panel, we'll have about 20 minutes for questions from the audience. Please put your questions in the chat and we'll receive them. Our first panelist is Gianluca de Fazio, Associate Professor in Justice Studies and Faculty Senate Representative. Gianluca, what does it mean to say the JMU campus is a commemorative landscape?
Thank you, Professor Phoenix-Neal. Thank you for this opportunity. When we are talking about a commemorative landscape, we are talking about a university memorial landscape that includes the array of buildings and other places that are named after someone. So it's not just buildings, but could be convocation centers, could be stadiums, all are part of our commemorative landscape. Now, why are these commemorative landscape important? They're important because they provide an indication of who belongs on campus, whose histories are important to universities. It gives us a clue about the identity of the universities. In fact, these named places and these named buildings tell a story. They tell a narrative about whose identities we want to emphasize, but also the silences behind this commemorative landscape tells us whose stories are not told. And when we are talking about naming, naming does not occur in a vacuum. It's not a neutral reflection of recorded history. Again, it embodies dominant values and narratives. So when we are talking about a commemorative landscape, we're really talking about how the physical landscape around us are telling stories about who is worthy, who is important. And by the silences, they're also telling us whose identities are not be deemed as important or worthy to be included in our landscape. So when we are talking about renaming or remembering, this is not about rewriting history. It's really an opportunity to reflect about past injustices, about past exclusion, about how these settings have been unwelcome to certain section of students' body and faculty and staff that are living and working on campuses across the United States. So when we are working on renaming, we are trying to give a more accurate history, a more inclusive history. We are trying to really make sure that people that have been historically forgotten or being whose contribution have been neglected are finally having a voice in our physical landscape and telling a different type of stories. Now, universities around the United States are rethinking their commemorative landscape. It's not just JMU. Throughout the United States, we have hundreds of universities and colleges that are rethinking their landscape. Why? Because they are trying to affirm changing values and changing priorities. They are trying to counter a narrative. And we know very often in the US South, this narrative was the narrative of the lost cause, or the myth of a great white man. And so with these new values and new narratives, we are trying to tell different stories about who we are and who we want to be as a university. Thank you.
History and Media Arts double major, Honors College, African, African American, and Diaspora Studies minors. Spencer, what is the importance of commemorative recognition for belonging, inclusivity, and equity? Please describe the work of the Commemorative Recognition Subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Professor Phoenix-Neal, and thank you, Professor DeFazio. I think Professor DeFazio touched on this quite a bit, but the importance of commemorative landscape, addressing the commemorative landscape and addressing naming is so much bigger than what it seems on its face. I think it's easy to reduce it to building names, but it really shows, like Professor DeFazio said, what we value, what kind of stories we're telling, and what we represent in our values as a university. So it's important to us that we take a lot of stories into consideration, that we tell an accurate and complete history, and we look at the nuance that our students, our faculty, our staff, and other university community members experience as a part of their connection to JMU. So when we're looking at putting together a renaming project, when we're looking at our commemorative landscape, it's important to hear all of those voices as a part of that process. So I've served on our Commemorative Recognition and Renaming Subcommittee throughout this process of our committee's work so far. And we've been through an extensive list of name submissions, well over 700 or 800 individual submissions with hundreds of different names from all sorts of different walks of life, all sorts of different backgrounds. And we've gone through the extensive process of reading all of those submissions, everything that comes in, addressing who those people are, and then defining criteria based on which we think it would be valuable to rename buildings on campus or name buildings in the future on campus. So those criteria we'll be posting on our website, and they're things like, does this person have a relationship with the university? Do they represent the values that our university represents? Have they served of historical importance, either in the Valley or on a national scale? And so we're looking at criteria like that when we're breaking down these extensive lists of names. And then we're using that to compile these names into a list that feels fitting. And we're continuing to take those voices of relevant community members into account throughout that entire process. So we've met with advisory boards that we'll discuss later in the panel today, from the student side of things and from the community side of things. And we're listening to all of these voices so that we can gather a more accurate picture of what people think would be a good representative name for these buildings on our campus. So it's been an extensive process, and we are thoroughly committed to this inclusive and intentional process of naming, because we know that it represents who we are and it represents our values. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Gianluca. I'd like to introduce Diane Strawbridge, Executive Director, Student Access and Inclusion, Director of Centennial Scholars and Valley Scholars Programs, and JMU alumna. Diane, can you explain our mapping project that the mapping subcommittee is working on, and the importance of honoring Black, Indigenous, and other people of color as a part of the commemorative landscape?
Thank you, Dr. Phoenix-Neal. The mapping subcommittee is examining the commemorative landscape that currently exists. As has been previously mentioned, JMU and other campuses across the country are also re-examining decisions that were made many, many, many years ago. People want to know, for whom are these places named? Why were the names chosen? What do the names represent? How do the names affect members of the community, especially when the history is painful and exclusionary? Who should be remembered, but has been marginalized and or overlooked? The mapping project is a longer-term goal that includes lots of research, background research into the name spaces. For each name, we're looking at the current and past names, current and past uses of the spaces, the year of the naming, the race and gender of the person or persons commemorated, and their affiliation with the university. We are organizing this work by campus location, such as the Quad, Bluestone area, North Campus, etc. We are also examining naming trends. For example, we have learned that out of 99 named buildings, some have generic names, 20 are named for white men, 8 for white women, 7 for white couples, and 2 for Black men. We want to create maps of the campus to better understand how our community members experience their remembered history. Additionally, we want to identify areas of campus where more inclusive and equitable naming can be implemented. Lastly, identify areas of campus where exhibits, memorial walls, and other commemorative actions can create a more inclusive environment. This is a huge undertaking, and we're just beginning to scratch the surface. There is much work to be done, but I feel we are slowly making progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I'd like to introduce Christopher Jones, Harrisonburg City Councilman, JMU alum, and Campus History Committee Community Advisory Board member. Christopher, can you explain the role of the Community Advisory Board and the value of our alumni and community voices in the commemorative process?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Phoenix-Neal. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Our advisory board was formed out of conversations and email exchanges around the July 15th mark, post a lot of the traumatic events that have happened in the social reckoning on race. Alumni, community members, students, lots of folks were contacted. And coming out of that were several individuals and several meetings that happened starting around September 15th, which included a targeted group of alumni and community members. The value and the purpose of having alumni and community members to speak into this process and this renaming process is extremely important. It gives an opportunity for those individuals who maybe attended the university at a time when it wasn't as inclusive, when it wasn't as accepting of hearing from people of color, hearing from specifically the African-American community, and recognizing that history. It gives a chance for those individuals to contribute into such a welcoming and new process. It also gives an opportunity to build a bridge between James Madison University and the city it resides in, Harrisonburg, Virginia. We call ourselves here in Harrisonburg the friendly city. And so we want to make sure the key component of being friends is to know one another, to have relationship, and leaving a mark on one another. And so it is our hope and our aim as an advisory board that the feeling and the sentiment of the city of Harrisonburg and the great things of James Madison University can come together in reflecting all of that love. I think sometimes we forget how important it is when we name something. We speak power, we speak life, and we're speaking what the future can be when we name a thing. And so I hope that as our Board of Visitors and administration move forward in this naming process, that ultimately we're speaking life and we're speaking truth to power when we choose the new name. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here today and represent the advisory board of alumni and community members. We thank you for being a part of the process.
Thank you for being here, Christopher. I turn to Norman Jones, major, Honors College, and African American, and Diaspora Studies minors, student representative, JMU Board of Visitors. Norman serves on the Commemorative Renaming and Recognition Subcommittee. Could you explain the role and importance of the Student Advisory Board in our commemorative recognition process?
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Phoenix-Neal. Similar to what Chris mentioned, as we have community voices in this process, we also know that it is imperative to engage students in this as well. And so we convened a student advisory board of 18 student leaders on our campus to share their comments, recommendations, and potential questions about this process of renaming, reclaiming, and repairing history as it relates to this campus and our community. And so their insight guides us in understanding the student perspective, as each of them leads various organizations and advocates on behalf to make sure that we're making the right decisions and fully engaging with our student body. And there's a lot of value in that, aside from it being the blatantly obvious and right thing to do. The student view, especially in regard to our campus environment and landscape, is incredibly valuable. I mean, we should be cultivating a space for people to feel welcomed and empowered to maximize their potential while they are here. And so as a vital part of this process, the Student Advisory Board is one way to ensure that we're striving towards that goal, both effectively and transparently, and making sure that we're in alignment, with their needs. So the Student Advisory Board has been a valuable insight for us, and we continue to use them as a resource, but also a way for us to connect with the student body as a whole.
Thank you, Norman. Before we open the floor to questions from our audience, I'll address this question to Meg. What is the Campus History Committee process for recommending new names for buildings and spaces?
Thanks. That's a very important question. I wanted to just make two comments before we segue. So first off, I think it's important for people to know that JMU is a member of universities studying slavery and segregation. This is a more than 60 plus institution consortium that is based at the University of Virginia, and we have really benefited greatly by studying what other campuses have been doing, both within Virginia as well as across the US and even internationally. So our process really aligns very nicely with merging together a series of recommendations, some of which have to do with naming, some of which have to do with history. We'll be compiling all of that into a report and submitting it to President Alger and the cabinet for ultimate consideration by the Board of Visitors. We'll be making that report probably in December. That is part of fulfilling our charter. Working together as a committee, we still will have opportunities for feedback from others, and it will be interesting to see what the final results look like. I'm very excited.
Pulled from the chat. Right now, we haven't received any questions from the live chat. We seem to have answered several questions that were emailed in advance. I do have a question for Norman. It is, how can people participate after today's discussion in our recognition and renaming process?
That is a great question. This is not the only opportunity, like you alluded to, for us to hear from you. So while we might not have any questions today, there are a number of ways that you might be able to participate after this panel. So first and foremost, you can subscribe to our email list to receive updates on our work. And hopefully there will be a piece of information that you can find to receive that. But should you not be able to see that in the chat, you can most directly visit our website and even email us at campushistory@jmu.edu. And so there you can email us with your feedback and or questions. You can also follow us on social media at JMU Campus Hist, which is JMU, the word campus, HIST, all in one, on Twitter, as well as at JMU Campus History on Instagram. So there are all of these avenues for you to stay up to date on our work as we go forward and potentially give us feedback as we move forward with this process. But as we've gone through a lot of information today to help inform, we figured it'd be important to tie it all together with a story that serves as an example of the culmination of this process. And so if we pull together those views about community and students, as well as our criteria and what we're looking for as we work towards this process of renaming, reclaiming, and repairing, we figured we'd share an example. So Spencer, do you mind sharing a story of the kinds of names that we might be recognizing?
Absolutely, Norman. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of my friends and colleagues here who have been so gracious in participating today. This story that I'm going to share with you all is one of the several stories that we've shared on our social media accounts and that we'll continue to share as a part of our Reclaimed Histories series, where we're looking at underrepresented stories from people on campus and people related to this commemorative recognition process. And today we're going to be talking about Lillian Jennings. To diversify hiring and compliance with federal equity opportunity requirements, despite Virginia's continued efforts to resist school desegregation, Madison College hired its first 3 African-American faculty members in 1974. They were Flossie Love, coach of women's track and field and instructor of physical education, Sam Benson, part-time art instructor, and Lillian Jennings, assistant dean of the School of Education and professor of psychology and education. Jennings was likely the first Black administrator at Madison. Born May 24th, 1926 in Ohio, Jennings fulfilled her childhood desire to become a school teacher after attending Youngstown State University and graduating with a bachelor's degree in elementary education. She later received a master's degree from Edinburgh University and a PhD in educational psychology from the University of Pittsburgh. With a research focus on teacher preparation, Jennings joined the faculty of Madison College in 1974 as an assistant dean of the School of Education and professor of psychology and education. Because of her practical and scholarly expertise, in 1984, she became the first Black woman appointed to the Harrisonburg School Board. Jennings served on the board until August 1988, when she took a research leave from JMU to study education policy and school law at University of California, Los Angeles. Jennings retired from her position as Associate Dean of the College of Education and Human Resources in 1989. Having attained emeritus faculty status, she moved permanently to California, where she published 3 books about her ancestors who were enslaved in South Carolina. She died in December 2016 in North Las Vegas, Nevada, at the age of 90.
Thank you, Spencer, for that wonderful story. This concludes our informational panel discussion, Reclaiming, Renaming, and Repairing. And so, on behalf of the Campus History Committee, I thank you all for your support and participation today.